Why do I keep yelling at my kids? Why do I keep yelling at my partner? Why do I keep like exploding? Let's just put it that way. Short and sweet and simple. But really it's, why am I finding myself behaving in a way that I quickly regret later? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about why that might be happening. And also, what can you do about it in the moment? And what can you do about it to help prevent it down the road? So we're going to jump right in. I hope that's okay. The why behind why do I keep yelling? I'm just going to call it that. Why do I keep yelling? Because that's really a lot of what the questions were. Well, why do I keep yelling at my kids? And we're going to get into another episode which deals with why do I keep fighting about the same things? So let's just stay with the kid part on this one. Why do I keep yelling at my kids? And there are a couple potential reasons why. I'm going to deal with the ones that I most commonly see in my office, but also the ones that, happen to me most regularly. And the first one is, and this may not be true for you, but largely it can be effective in that you stop a behavior in the moment, or you encourage a behavior that you're trying to encourage in the moment. So, you're getting ready for school in the morning. You're trying to hustle people out the door. No one is moving very fast. They don't have their shoes on. You've asked 14 times and you finally scream, if you don't get your shoes on right this very second, I'm leaving without you, or whatever other threat you're going to make. And again, I only say that because I've been there and I know. So no judgment. You shout, and usually it snaps people into attention and can mean that they do the thing that you've asked them to do. I can't tell you how many times people have said to me, my kids only listen when I'm screaming at them. And here's the kind of, bad news is that they won't listen for long when that happens. It's true in a classroom. It's true in a home. It's true wherever kids and adults interact. The more a person yells, the less a kid hears it. So it's effective in the beginning and it works in the beginning, or it works if it's an infrequent thing, but those aren't the people asking questions. The people asking questions are the ones that find themselves sort of shouting all the time at kids. And so the answer that we keep doing it is sometimes it's because it works, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is usually because you are in that moment reacting from a place of being triggered rather than reacting in your kind of calm and clear self. So rather than get into a whole big explanation of triggers, I will recommend another podcast episode where we talk about that and what happens to your body biologically and what happens neurologically and what happens, from a perspective of trauma and past learning that happens when you're triggered. But we'll just kind of simplify and say, when you're reacting that way, when you're reacting in a way that you reflect back on and you didn't like, that's usually because you're reacting from a place of trigger. You're sort of in that heightened, activated fight or flight or freeze stage, and you're actually no longer reacting to what's right in front of you and instead acting from either what you learned or what was imprinted on you when you were a kid, or reliving some sort of thing that makes your body feel unsafe. So sometimes in those moments, we can be thinking things that are based on what we learned as a kid. So like if I was a kid that grew up in a household where you did not, quote unquote, disrespect your parents, I wouldn't have been slow to get ready for school, or I wouldn't have not cleaned my room the first time they asked, or I wouldn't have, like, all the things that your kids are doing. You think I would have never done that as a kid. But that while that may be true, likely if it was true, it was because you felt unsafe to sort of push those boundaries as a kid, or you felt like you grew up in a place where nobody cared. If it was like sort of a free for all, if you will, like you could be late, you could be this, you could be that, or it just wasn't your nature to do. I know plenty of people who, like, their nature wasn't to push any limits. They were just kind of like, yeah, I get ready because my mom told me to get ready. I clean my room because my mom told me to clean my room. Like, there are some kids out there that just do that. Not the large majority of them, but some. But if you were a kid like that and you never really knew like what a consequence was for not listening, which is what most of the time drives people to scream and shout, is they think their kids aren't listening to them. If you were some of those, some people who grew up in a different environment, either where that just wasn't tolerated, meaning you got punished if you tried that, or it just never came up as a thing, then you're very often not wanting to pass down the bad stuff. Like, I don't want to treat my kids like my parents treated me. So like, I didn't talk back, but I don't want my kids to not talk back because they're terrified of me, which is the reason I didn't talk back. Or you just don't really know. You don't have like a track record or train tracks to stay on in this lane, in this scenario. So you can then go into all kinds of thoughts that are negative toward you and negative toward your kids. Like, I am a terrible parent, or they never listen to me because they don't respect me, or they're trying to manipulate me, or they're just bad kids. Like any one of those things, I'm sure we've all thought at one time or another. And in the light of day, in the calm of the after, we realize none of that's true. Like, kids are not built to manipulate adults. It's just not how they work. It can look that way sometimes because the behavior is such that it can make us feel like we're being manipulated, or we can feel disrespected, but that's typically not the intention of a child. There are those outliers out there with some real mental health struggles, but for the most part, kids are not trying to disrespect us or to manipulate us with their behaviors. That's not the point of their behaviors. But when you're in that state of triggered and you're sort of responding from that fight or flight area, that's what you're thinking, because you can't make sense of the other stuff. So that's what we're going to get into. What do you do in the moment to stop the yelling, or at least to repair from the yelling? And then what can you do to help make it a less frequent state in your home? Because the people who are asking me this question are bothered by how much they're doing it. So I want to help you not do it so much. So what can you do in the moment? So going back to that idea that you are no longer reacting to the child in front of you, you're reacting to some sort of triggered memory or experience in life. You want to get out of that state as quickly as you can. And that may require a couple things, or one of these things. I'm going to name a bunch and you choose what you think is most beneficial for you. And it might be some trial and error, and there might be some mistakes made and all of that stuff in between. And that's fine, because we'll get to why all this is fine later. But the first thing is just think of taking a time out for yourself. And it's not always physically possible. If you're in a car, obviously you can't be like, give me a minute, kids, and get out, pull over and get out and take a walk. But like, if you're at home and they are not, they're not getting ready fast enough for school, or they're not getting in the bathtub, or they've just gotten out of the bathtub and they're running around the room, not getting ready for bed, like whatever it is that's got you sort of, ready to blow your top. If you can step away from that for a minute even, and just give yourself a change of pace, and so you're not sort of confronted with it, that can help you then to ground into what I'm going to call like, ask what's real right now. It's hard to ask the question, what's real right now, when you're right in front of the thing that's triggered you, because your nervous system doesn't know, because it thinks what's real right now is what it's responding to, which is making you be in that fight or flight stage. So in order to answer the question, what's real right now, sorry, that's a mouthful. What's real right now? You need to give yourself some space from the child and that behavior as much as you can. I always caution to like sort of throw these big things out there, because I know that sometimes they happen in the middle of a shopping mall or at a public park or at grandma's, and you can't just leave the situation or the room, or you'll have 10 other people coming in, or you'll, have the Child Protective Services called or whatever. Like I'm being realistic. I want to be realistic and acknowledging sometimes you can't walk away, but what you can do is close your eyes. You can soothe yourself, like butterfly hugs, which is when you put opposing arms, like take your hands and put them on the opposite bicep and just kind of rub up and down. You can hear me doing it because I always do it when I talk about it. So if you hear that weird noise in the microphone, that's what it is. I'm giving myself a butterfly hug. You can take a couple deep breaths. You can close your eyes if it feels okay in the moment, especially if it's just a matter of the kid is not doing what you want them to do and they're perfectly safe. They're just not conforming. You can close your eyes and take like a deep breath and like exhale with volume, do the sort of, and like push out that tension. It helps relax you and it helps ground you in the moment. And so in the moment, when you're able to answer the question, what's real right now, you move from, or you're able to be curious. So you can move from, my child is a brat, or my child is disrespectful, or my child is trying to manipulate me, or whatever it is, fill in the blank. My child is whatever is super negative and and seemingly impossible to solve. Grounding yourself in the moment, asking what's real right now can help you move from that to the curiosity that leads to, oh, my child is behaving this way because they need XYZ. They are not getting ready to go to school because they're still tired, or they haven't eaten and they're hungry, or they are nervous about something that's going to happen at school. And the bottom line then, and this is going to move us into the next part, but I want to, and I'll come back in a second, but the bottom line with getting curious is you're looking for a reason for the behavior. And those reasons are not, my child is manipulative, my child's disrespectful, my child is bad. Those are almost never the reasons. I don't want to say never because I don't like absolutes, but they're almost never the reasons. Often the reason is my child's looking for attention. And for some reason, we've twisted that into something bad. Oh, he just wants attention. Yeah, he does. That's a kid's job, is to get our attention. If you think way, way back to when they're babies, we weren't mad at them for crying. And all they were doing when they were crying was trying to get our attention because they were hungry or sleepy or cold or overstimulated or understimulated or bored or any of those things. They were something. And so they cried to get our attention and have us help them solve that problem. It doesn't change much when they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 18, 19. That basic need for attention to help with a problem doesn't really go away. How we ask for it changes and evolves and can sometimes look really negative. So when I say get curious, what I want is for parents, myself included, to look at a behavior that is frustrating and think, what are they needing now? What is this for? What are they trying to communicate to me? Rather than come at it from just a straight up place of frustration where all we want them to do is stop. As always, I'm going to enter my little parental caveat here and say, this is not going to work every single time. Sometimes you're going to blow your top. Sometimes you are angry or hungry or tired or whatever, and you don't have the patience anymore. And that's okay. We're going to get to why that's okay a little later, but just know that this is a best case scenario, and it is a way to stop yelling so much. And I'll be honest, it is what I did when I found myself having a relationship with my kids that I did not like, when I was like, all I'm doing is reacting and punishing and telling them no and not allowing them to sort of, be kids. I had this expectation for how they should behave. And when they didn't meet it, which was frequently because my expectations were insane, I reacted in a way that was not great. And I didn't like that anymore. So I got curious about, well, how can I change this? How can I do something differently so that our relationship is better, so that I feel better? Because nobody feels good screaming. Even if it feels really good in the moment, which, come on, let's be honest, sometimes it feels really good in the moment to just scream. Even if it does feel really good in the moment, we never feel good long term. We feel guilty. We feel shamed. We feel like we're the worst parents in the world. We feel like we're worried that we're going to mess up our kids, all of those things. So nobody wants to be somebody who yells all the time. And sometimes you're going to yell, and that's okay. So know that all of this sort of advice I give, all of these steps I'm giving, I understand it's not going to happen 100% of the time, but you'll see why it's going to be okay later if you do it most of the time. So rewinding, because I went on off on a tangent there, sorry. You've got an instance that has gotten your blood boiling, for lack of a better way of saying it, and you explode, you let loose, you scream, do this thing or else, or why can't you just listen to me? Or why do you always have to be so disrespectful? Or why do you know how it goes. At my worst moments, I was name calling, I was shaming, I was doing all the things. You're in those moments. You got to stop. You take a minute, you take a deep breath, you get whatever you need to get done. And here's what you can do. You go to them and say, I see that you're having a hard time with fill in the blank, getting ready, putting your clothes on, settling down for bed, whatever. I see that that's really hard for you right now. I need you to sleep so that you feel okay tomorrow, or I need you to get to school so that you can have a good day at school. I need you to eat so that you're not hungry. Give them sort of what has to happen in this moment. And so I'm going to do this. And I would like to know if I can help you do what you need to do. How can I help you? very often, and I know there's going to be some parents out there rolling their eyes at me because they're going to be like, it never works with my kid. But very often, just that connection point of, hey, I see you and I see you're having a hard time with this and I want to be of assistance. That connection point is oftentimes enough to be like, oh, okay, that's the motivation. That's what they were looking for. They were looking for that attention and connection. What you might get is a sudden, explosion of their own of, I don't want to go to school. So-and-so is mean to me, or I need to, there's a test, or somebody said she was going to bring something and she didn't bring it, or, whatever the case is, whatever the stressor is, it's there and they may tell you about it. No, they may not, but they may tell you about it in the moment. And then you're prepared and it's a little easier to handle a kid who's not listening if you realize it's because they're stressed out or they're anxious or they're whatever. So that's in the moment. What do you do in the moment? You try to get yourself together. You try to ground into the present rather than, reacting to what your body thinks is happening. You try to remind your body, no, we're fine. We're safe. We have nothing to be upset about. We need to be curious about what's going on and how we can move this along here. At some point, you'll apologize. It doesn't have to be right in that moment. It's usually best, especially if you're trying to get somewhere. A lot of times the yelling happens when you're trying to move things along. You sometimes don't have time for the apology in that moment, but you can come back to it later. And it's this is the imperative part. The repair piece is the reason why I say it's okay to sometimes yell, because if you're following it up with the repair, then it's going to be okay in the long run. That child's attachment, that sense of security is not going to be shattered if you yell at them once or twice. As long as you go back and say, I realized that hurt your feelings and that wasn't a great way for me to handle it, and I'm sorry. The key components to the repair are that an apology and sometimes an explanation of why, but only if it serves the purpose of teaching them how to handle their own emotions. So, we're human and we're teaching them how to be humans. And so the apology, because you never want to hurt them and you never mean to hurt them and you never mean to make them feel bad about needing your attention. So the apology is, I'm sorry for those things. I know yelling is scary. I know yelling can make you feel like I don't care. I don't mean any of those things. I was finding that I was in a hurry and I was impatient and I was having a hard time handling my frustration about that. And so I accidentally, I yelled at you and I'm sorry. So the repair is the most important part of all of it, because what you're saying to them is, you as a human, you are okay. You and I might have some conflict over the behaviors and the choices, and it might not go well all the time. But it's never because there's something wrong with you. And it's never because I don't love you. That's the power of the repair, is the reassurance to a child that you are their person and you are that, and you love them unconditionally and you will show up for them time and time again, even if you mess it up. That's what the repair is important about. So that has to be a component of all of this. So you know what to do in the moment. You know how to come back from it when it happens, because it's going to happen. What do we do to keep it from happening a lot? I told you that this used to be, I had 3 children under 6, 4, and 2 at one point. 3 very, well, let me say 2 large personalities 100% of the time, and 1 large personality when he felt like nobody was giving him what he needed. So all 3 of them knew very much how to get what they needed. And some of them were more persistent than others in it. But the one that was not the sort of constant would, he was the one that would lose it in the middle of the store, or he was the one that I had to carry his 80-pound body out of somewhere because he was thrashing and screaming and whatever. So I tell you all this just to tell you, like, I have been in it and I have done it all wrong. And I have also come back and really forged a beautiful, peaceful relationship with my children. And so I know personally, but also professionally, because this is what I do day in and day out with folks. I help them communicate better with their kids, and I help them learn the behaviors of their kids, and I help them shed their own childhood junk so that they can be different parents than they had all day long. That's what I do. So I can tell you that you can extinguish, maybe not extinguish, that's a little too strong a word. You can diminish the behaviors that are bothering you right now, both yours and theirs. And one of the keys to that is that you start with your own. You start with, how do I change my behavior in these situations rather than try to control them? How do I control me? So there's a couple things, and they all start with being curious about what is needed in these situations. So if you're able to kind of step back from it, again, none of this is happening in the moment, but when the blow up occurs, when you get them to school, when you get them in bed, when you get them whatever, and you have some time to sort of reflect on it, which I recognize we don't have a lot of that. Please, I'm under no illusion that you have hours and hours to sit around and think of this, but even just in the shower after it happened, or in the car on the way to work after you've dropped them at school, or whatever the case is, a few minutes to just think like, let me replay that whole thing all the way through. Or every morning I'm screaming at them. Like if it's a pattern, even better. So exciting. I love when people say it happens every morning, because it's so much more clear than what's going on. And you start with what would have helped in this situation. What do I think it is my kid needed? Is he waking up every morning miserable because he doesn't go to bed until 11 o'clock at night? Okay, then we need to work on sleep. And you're not going to like this advice sometimes, because it's not quick. Sometimes the solution to the problem is not fast. It's something like, okay, we got to get a better sleep schedule. But at least there's an answer to, okay, if he wakes up differently, then the whole morning goes differently. Sometimes it's a logistics thing. Like if you're fighting every single morning about an outfit to wear, then it's time to start laying the outfit out the night before and putting those borders around, those boundaries around what happens in the morning. I've had so many parents say to me, oh, we laid it out the night before and then they didn't want to wear it the next day. And I'm like, okay, well, that's where your boundaries are then. You say, I know this is tricky, and I know right now you're feeling like you don't want to wear this. You've changed your mind. But we lay them out the night before because we don't have a lot of time to go through a bunch of outfits in the morning. And this is going to help our morning go more smoothly, and you're going to feel better when you get to school. So maybe this other outfit that you saw, or this other idea, we'll put that away for tomorrow. We'll put that out tonight and you can wear it tomorrow. But right now, this is the outfit you chose for today. It's hard. I'm not trying to say, oh, just say this one thing and everything will go great. It won't. They won't like it. Kids don't like boundaries any more than adults like boundaries, but the kids thrive with boundaries. So once you have established what is the thing that we needed here in order for it to go better, then you can say, okay, how do I implement that in a way that eventually works? And then again, once you get into a routine of things, you can always tweak. If I have a story about my own that he has been, I don't know, since he could open his eyes, maybe, I don't know. That's obviously an exaggeration, but for a very long time, a video game kid. Like he just loves video games, always has, always will. And there was a time, I can't remember exactly, maybe 4th or 5th grade, where he wanted to play before school in the morning. And of course, my initial instinct was absolutely not, because you will never be able to make it to school on time. You don't like getting out of bed, blah, blah, blah. I had a million reasons why not. I was irritated at the mere suggestion of it, because I thought, of course you can't play a video game before school. That's terrible parenting. Like why I thought my kid should be responsible for my parenting, I don't know. But that was my initial thought, was like, that would be terrible of me as a parent to say yes to this. Anyway, he is the persistent one. And so we ended up working out a deal. And I thought I was very savvy, because I said, if you wake up a half an hour early and you're finished everything, you've eaten, so he must have been like 3rd or 4th grade, because he was old enough to get up and pour himself a bowl of Cheerios and, that kind of stuff. If you've eaten, your backpack's packed, your lunch is packed, your water bottle, all these things, then sure, if there is a half an hour left, you can play a video game. But the minute that you fight me to go to school in the morning, this privilege gets taken away. So boundary. Like, yes, I'm saying yes, but here's how it's going to work. And I thought, there's no way this kid's going to make this happen. He's going to sleep in. He's going to fight. I mean, really what I thought was, he's going to fight me to leave for school. I'm going to have to get in a fight with him. And then I'm just going to take it off the table. The offer's off the table. Well, as I would quickly learn about him, he does what he wants. And so he never once fought me to go to school. He was always ready. His lunch was always packed. He was always dressed and eaten and all of the things, teeth brushed, all of the things, and would have a half an hour to play his game and would come upstairs as soon as I called him. But I had to establish for myself what is going to keep me from being triggered, because I know if I'm going to have to fight with him every single morning to do this, then it's not going to work for any of us. And then I had to set those parameters for him in order for it to work. And then I had to just roll the dice and see if it worked. And if it hadn't, I had already made it very clear, like, look, this is how you earn this thing. So part of that curiosity is what would have helped here, what's needed, but also what is going to work going forward? Like, what do I need him or her to do in order to make this successful? So, bedtime, bath time is always tricky for people. A lot of times it's tricky because you're exhausted by the time you get to that point of the day. I don't care if you work in an office job or you stay home all day. Bedtime and bath time is exhausting. That said, it can be also one of the most quality times to connect with your child, no matter how old they are. Quite frankly, they'll tell you all their truth right before they're about to go to bed. And so kind of learning them in their natural habitat is important. And I'm not saying don't make the rules, and I'm not saying don't make the schedule, but I am saying pay attention to how they behave in those times and see if there's any way you can tweak or move the schedule so that you guys are connecting rather than you having to just tell them what to do every time. For instance, if you have kids that love to be read to, then that becomes the thing that anchors the rest of the evening. If you want to like snuggle with mom, then that becomes the thing that anchors the rest of it. So we have to get all these things done in order to snuggle with mom. And that's not a punishment or like a consequence. It's really more like, here's how the night needs to go. Here, we do this, we take a bath, we do this, we get in bed, you get to run around. And that's a key component. If you see, again, mom of two boys every night, actually the girl was the same. I shouldn't gender here. They all three were the same. There's this we had a puppy. I don't know if you've ever had a puppy, but we have a puppy that she's over a year now. But when she was little, the vet warned us. He's like, you know about zoomies, right? And I was like, okay. He goes, it's just like an expulsion of energy that puppies get where they just randomly will start tearing around your house, running and running, or sometimes jumping, sometimes barking, like whatever it is, it's a physical like explosion of behavior. And it's really just like an energy output. I swear kids have the same thing. I don't know the science behind it. And I've not done the research other than anecdotally, but everybody I know, myself included, has this time of night where kids are just like little animals, bear cubs. I used to call my boys bear cubs because they would just be really physical with each other, bath time. And then it's this time you're supposed to be winding down, and they would be all over each other, wrestling, running, screaming, like roughhousing. And in the beginning, of course, I fought it because in my mind, I was reacting to my expectation was this was wind down time. And how dare these kids not be winding down? Again, how dare they? Like, how ridiculous is that to even say those words? How dare these small children not be conforming to my ideals? It's silly, but it's the truth. That's how I felt in the moment. Once I realized, and so wait, let me go back, because part of the reason I felt that way was because every time they started doing that, not only did I feel disrespected, but I felt like, oh God, I'm never going to get them to bed. I thought like this is the beginning of the unraveling of this plan. And then when I realized, actually, wait a minute, they do this for like 10 minutes and I can leave and go and empty the tub and hang up the towels and do all the things that have to be done while they're like safely rolling around, beating each other up in their bedrooms. Once I come back, they have kind of worn themselves out and they're ready, just like the puppy, to lay down and relax. So I noticed that's what was going on. And I thought, okay, I'll just work it in. I'll work in this like Zoomy time for my children. And I'll go about my business. And then we still have books in bed and whatever. So I extended a little bit of the bedtime, the parameters of what that time meant. If you want them asleep by 8:30, you got to start at 7 or whatever the case. And again, I recognize these are sort of perfect scenarios when you've got t-ball practice or something else, or you're not eating till 7 or whatever. Like you can't always do this perfectly. But more often than not, if you decide, okay, this is what I want the night to look like, then you rearrange things around it. So for instance, bedtime for us was pretty strict. The like sleeping time was pretty strict because I knew that these little people did not function well if they didn't get the sleep they needed. And so sometimes that meant we didn't eat dinner as a family because my husband wasn't home in time. Sometimes it meant I didn't shower them or I showered them when they were little. I bathed them together. Sometimes it meant they got 5-minute showers instead of 10-minute, like I timed things so that we were fully asleep. Sometimes it meant we ate chicken nuggets or I didn't eat what they ate or, whatever it needed to be. I had goals, if you will, for what the night entailed. And then I could work the schedule around that. And they got used to things. They got used to the way things were done. It was always a bath and teeth and pajamas and wrestling and books. Like it became pretty standard. Honestly, they still have some of those habits today, and they're full grown adults, some of them, to a couple teenagers and an adult. And they still have some of those like wind down rituals that I see. It's actually kind of sweet. And the ones that are home, I still say goodnight to every single night. So you can keep those relationships in some capacity when you set them up like that too, which is an added bonus to all of it. All of this is to say that some of the why do I keep yelling is because their behavior is triggering something in you. And so the very first step is to get curious about that. Why am I reacting this way? Why do I think it's happening? Fill in those blanks a couple times. My child is what in this moment? And if you find yourself saying, my child's disrespectful, my child's manipulative, my child's a brat, my child's a pain in the ass, then you need to examine that. Why am I thinking that? Because instead, what you should be thinking is, my child is doing this because they need this. And so you're filling in those blanks instead. That's the more productive way to look at it. My child is avoiding school because they're anxious. My child is avoiding sleep because there's something on their mind and they want to tell me about it. Or my child isn't listening to me because they just want me to sit next to them and be present instead of on my phone, or instead of running around, or instead of moving from one thing to the next. And I say that not to make you feel bad, because I know that's immediately what most of you are going to do. And that is not my intent. I say that because I think sometimes we think we're connecting and engaging with them merely because we're just with them all day. And we're really not necessarily connecting and engaging because we're busy trying to do dishes and cook dinners and get to work and do that report and take a Zoom meeting and whatever else we're doing. Yes, they're physically present, but we're not necessarily connecting with them. And so remember that way old thing back in the day when they tried to say it was okay for moms to work all day and, not be with their kids, because the other side of the fence was saying these are terrible women who want to work all day. Anyway, the thing that came out of that was it's quality, not quantity of time. There is some truth to that, regardless of where it came from and why people were fighting over it. There is some truth to that. If you're connecting and engaging with your kids, then all of these negative behaviors diminish. Even if you're only connecting and engaging with them for the few hours that you're both in the same place at the same time, as long as in those hours, they feel seen and heard, then you are going to feel seen and heard. They are going to hear you more than they're currently hearing you, because there's this connection point, this engagement, instead of just you yelling at them to do things when you need them to do things. And then you feel like, oh, they actually care about me. They respect me. They listen to me. Not all the time, but most of the time. It will definitely increase from where you're feeling it now. So in the moment, if you can take a minute to close your eyes, to take a breath, to soothe yourself physically, to sort of remind your nervous system that you are in the here and now with a child and not in some unsafe place where you feel like you're triggered and ready to fight or flight. If you can calm yourself in that moment, then you can do the next step, which is get curious about this behavior. And then you do the next step, which is alter your own behavior in order to get the results you want. And then going forward, repair, and try to think future situations. How do I make this more supportive for both of us so that we don't get to this point as frequently as we do? And that usually takes some changing of you and the way you're doing things. And then they'll sort of fall in line to it too. So I hate to say it, but how do you stop yelling at your kids so much? You change yourself. And that's how you stop yelling at your kids. This is why I do what I do, because this is the job and you need support to do that job. It's hard. I was able to do all of these things because I had a great group of mom friends. I had a great therapist. I had a great mother-in-law who helped. I had a really good support system around me to also, I read all the books and listened to all of back then there were no podcasts, but read all the blogs and understood that everybody else was in it with me, and relied a lot on my education that I got with the master's degree in teaching, how to do behavior management in a classroom and how to do attachment parenting as a mom. I kind of, melded those things together, and then was supported by a partner and in-laws and friends and neighbors that helped lighten the load a little bit. So it can be done, but you need support to do it. And so that's why I do what I do, to offer that support to people. So once again, I fully believe you got this. For those who ask the question, how do I stop yelling? I hope that this information is helpful. And if not, if you want more and you need more and you have more questions, please do not hesitate to send me an email, because I would love to answer your individual questions and help you, move through this process a little more smoothly. Thank you for listening. I hope this was what you needed to hear.